She's going. I'm gonna shut this off.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let me just get this screen locked here so it's on you guys and not me. Let's see. Why is that not?
Hey, on you. I meant, will we not seem to talk to him now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just the problem is it's when you when I start talking it toggles back to me on the broadcast. So I want to make sure that the screen stays on you.
Because you know something that, right?
But doesn't it look comfortable and casual in this setting?
It doesn't do that. You should always have shoulders up.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I think Arden is watching in as well. Are you guys, did you have a good Thanksgiving and everything?
Yes, we did. Thank you.
Yeah, good. So I just finished your book last night. Very much enjoyed it.
You read it?
Yes, absolutely. Fantastic. Obviously, you guys spent many years on this topic. And actually, to start off, I'd just like you to talk a little bit about the genesis of the book, how it came about from your reporting on autism for the past 15 years.
Well, John and I were both journalists at ABC News. John's a correspondent and I'm a producer. And we were sort of the first team at ABC News producing stories on autism.
Back in the early 2000s, yeah.
And about not quite a decade through it, we thought we needed to do something that would be more everlasting and tell the true stories of autism that hadn't been told before.
Because TV stories come and go, but a book is always there.
Gotcha. Okay, so in that vein, let's talk about some of you have lots of fascinating stories about characters that people may not know about. You start off with the story of Donald Triplett, the first child who was officially diagnosed with autism. And throughout the book, there's more familiar characters like Leo Kanner and Temple Grandin. But I'd like you to talk about maybe a couple of the other characters that people might not know about and just kind of tell their story.
So Donald is one of the ones that you think people don't know about, right?
I think so, yeah. I didn't know.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so
Yeah, most people don't.
Yeah, I mean, the amazing thing about Donald Triplett, two amazing things about Donald Triplett is that in the medical literature, he was the 5-year-old boy who was first seen in 1938 at Johns Hopkins and by a child psychiatrist who looked at Donald and then after that 10 other children, and that child psychiatrist is the one who said there's something here that hasn't been really recognized before and it's called autism. He called it autism. And that's number one amazing thing about Donald Triplett is that he is listed as case number 1. He's like case 1.
First person ever born with autism.
And the second amazing thing about Donald Triplett is that he's still alive and he's 82 years old. He lives in a little town in Mississippi called Forest, and he's kind of our friend. I mean, we've spent a lot of time with him. We've been down to Forest a bunch of times. We're speaking to you from New York City, and amazingly enough, Donald's got on a plane a couple of months back, and he wanted to visit New York, and he flew up to New York and checked himself into a hotel and gave us a call and said, I'm in town, let's hang out a little bit.
But Donald had classic autism when he was first diagnosed. And if you were to meet him today and the extraordinary life this guy has led, and he still has autism, he's not, you would know if you met him that he was different.
Yeah.
But he travels around the world. He lives in a home, the home that he grew up in actually by himself. He drives. Did you tell him that he's a golfer yet?
Yeah, he plays golf kind of obsessively. So he's had a really good life. Now that's by contrast with another person in the story. Another person I don't think anybody's really heard of before. And he was a little boy named Archie Casto. Archie Casto was around the year 1915 as a 5-year-old boy diagnosed as insane. And he was put in an institution in West Virginia, cut off from his family, basically lived the next many, many, many decades in a room with other people. That room was his life. That's how institutions worked then. They were overcrowded, understaffed, and people like Archie just, ended up walking from one wall to the other to the other.
Once you went in, you never came out. You really didn't.
The happy ending, though, in Archie's story is that in the 1980s approximately, his younger sister, who had been told when he was a little boy never to speak of him again and to let him be the family secret, well, she didn't want to do that anymore. And she found out where he was. She didn't know how to drive, so she learned how to drive and got to the institution where he was and tried to build a relationship again with Archie. Now, Archie by this time was about probably 59, 60, 61 years old, something like that. Did recognize her, but he had lost all ability to speak. He, by the way, had no teeth in his mouth because they'd all been pulled at some point in his life by the institution. Maybe he bit somebody or he was biting himself. He had no teeth in his mouth, and he had a very, very limited life. And over time, his sister kept visiting him and trying to draw him out. And then one day, his sister read an article about autism, and she brought in an expert to the institution, and they diagnosed Archie as having had autism all these years, from even before the time it was recognized. And after that, he was released from the institution and allowed to live in a small private house. And when he was in his very late 70s, he was taken on a trip to the ocean, which he'd never seen.
For the first time in his life as a, is he 80?
Yeah, and he was given toys, which he never had as a child because the institution took away all of his toys. And he ended up having, you know, as a very old man, freedom in his life. It's a beautiful story.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful story.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites in the book, actually. So, and toward the end, you devote a chapter to the concept of neurodiversity. I was wondering if you could explain that concept for our readers and talk about that a bit.
Neurodiversity is the idea, and it's actually a philosophy, almost a movement, almost a political movement. The idea that people whose brains are wired differently in ways that we tend to call autistic, that those people should not be seen as less than human. They should not be seen as broken humans, but that they should be seen as a different way of being human, fully human, just not the usual way. And it's
accepted for being different.
And accepted for being different. And it's something that a lot of parents have fought for over the years, is that acceptance. We believe in that acceptance. But where neurodiversity turns into a kind of political argument is that some of those who advocate the neurodiversity point of view also take the argument to the point that, well, if having autism is just another way of being human, then there should be no real efforts made to cure autism.
Treat it or educate people who
Right.
can't speak. And that's where the line gets really fuzzy, because there are people, you know, on the autism spectrum who can't speak. They don't have a voice for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they need other people to speak for them.
Gotcha. Well, in that vein, I think you do a great job throughout the book of demystifying autism. I think there's a lot of misconceptions. And actually, if you just spoke about it a little bit, but if you could talk a little more about the main misconceptions as we see them today, after decades of research and a lot of progress made. But what do we need to do now? What's the major takeaway for you guys in this book?
You know what, we wrote in a different key, mainly to get people who don't know about autism, who consider it mysterious and different and other and not related to them, to actually look at autism as something that's related to them, to get them to look at people who have autism as part of the whole community, as part of us.
Mm-hmm.
To care about it and to understand that in our story, the essence of our story is about parental love and about accepting people who are different.
And so what the book wants to say about the future as a takeaway is that as a society, we've come a very, very long way. We came a long way because parents really fought so hard to make a place in the world for their kids. But it's not just about kids. That all of these kids become adults. In the next decade, 500,000 people diagnosed with autism are going to become adults. And I'm saying 500,000 children diagnosed with autism are going to become adults. And that's the part of the work that's not done yet. And in fact, it's the chapter of the future that has to be written yet, is what is society's response going to be for the people who are adults? Because we really don't have solutions for their residential situations. We don't have ways to get employers to be willing in large numbers to give them jobs. And the thing is, we've been very, very good. It took a long time. We've been very good. We've come a long way in addressing the needs of children, but not adults. And what we want to say with our book is, look how far we've come. Look for this inspiration, right?
Take the inspiration from the book, but realize that there are now generations of people who don't have a place to go. And part of why they don't is because of the success of the past, that the adults with autism were in institutions. They weren't out and about. They didn't have lives. So nobody figured out what they could do or couldn't do, or where they could live, because they didn't need to. And now we need that. We never had that before. So it's a job half done. I mean, that's part of where we're going with this book also, which is look at where we've been, look at how far we've come, look at how parental love has changed the world for so many people. But we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's about it. I wanted to reiterate again. I think it's an important book. I think it's going to be a very big book when it publishes, very much in the vein of Far from the Tree, and Andrew Solomon. I think it's going to open a lot of eyes.
Last night, actually.
But anyway, thanks again, and you guys have a good weekend. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.